Greetings, Dubai, and welcome. I'm Paul Golini, Executive Vice President with Empire Communities and founding partner. I'm here today with George Carras, CEO and President of Realnet Canada, Inc. Realnet Canada is one of the leading Canadian data and market research companies in the real estate industry. We're here today, and our apologies for not being there in person. We would have loved to be there. George, maybe tell us a little bit about Realnet and what you do.
Oh, thanks, Paul, and thanks for the opportunity to address you all. Realnet is effectively the Bloomberg for the property markets in Canada. We have offices across the country and perform primary research in the property markets, both the commercial real estate markets and the new home and condominium markets. Realnet's research is the official source of information for associations like BUILD. Paul, you were the chair of that association, and the Toronto Real Estate Board.
Thank you. George, maybe you can speak to the audience today about what's happening from a national and Canadian perspective when we're talking about housing.
Yeah. So when if you look at Canada, on a map, it's the second largest country in the world by land area, second only to Russia. But when you look at our population, we rank way down the list. We're at 36th on a global basis. So when you actually look at population density for Canada, it's the 9th lowest population density in the world. But when you look at the kind of urbanization, Canada is the most urbanized country in the world. 81% of our population is urbanized. When you look at the OECD average, 41%, Canada is double the urbanization of the average. In fact, and this is an interesting point, remember when you're comparing Canada versus the US, it's 30% more urban than the United States is. So an urban structure really starts to drive the housing markets inside of Canada. In fact, when you look at Canada, 80% of Canadians live in that band that's 160 kilometers from the US border. And our top 5 cities represent 42% of the Canadian population. So Canada, although it's very big, is very, very urbanized and very, very dense. And intensification is happening in Toronto, not because of physical reasons as much as it is because of policy reasons. So the idea of the growth plan here, of course, is for the region to grow up and not out. But if you look carefully at the data, what it's showing you is the price of the homes in Toronto, the low-rise homes are growing in price, and the high-rise homes tend to be more stable in their price. Partly because we can create more of the high-rise homes, but we're not creating as many of the low-rise homes. And that's causing a major affordability gap here in Toronto that's separating the form of housing between low-rise and high-rise.
So what you're talking to us today is about the shift in the market from low-rise to high-rise. Maybe you can talk a little bit about this change in the market in the last 10 years.
Sure. So if you think about it, Paul, every home that exists today was at one point a new home. And those homes are created under a policy framework where governments allow certain kinds of homes to be created. If you look back 10 years ago here in the GTA, 75% of the new homes that were created were low-density homes. You can see here those are detached homes, semi-detached homes, townhomes, basically ground-oriented housing. And high-rise housing was only 25% of the overall market. And back then, detached homes outsold condos 2-to-1. That was in 2000. This is last year, in 2011 actually. You can see that the market had dramatically changed to the point where we were selling 3 condos for every 1 detached home. That's really as a result of some of the policy changes around growth. Grow up, not out, as the provincial growth plan said. So far for 2012, it's dialed back a bit, but still the most part of the housing market is all about apartment condominiums. In fact, outselling detached 2-to-1.
Right. So how does this relate to the market in terms of condominium sales in Toronto in the last few years?
So if you think about, fundamentally, why do we need housing? We need housing because it's a growing region. There's 2.5 million more people that live in the GTA today than did in 1980. And those people have to live somewhere. And if you look at new home sales in total and see how that shift has manifested itself, if you look at the average in the last 10 years, population growth in the region is about 98,000 people per year. That's roughly the size of Green Bay, Wisconsin. And in response to that population growth, we've sold about 40,000 new homes. So that means for every 10 more people that actually live in the region, the market sells 4 homes. That's about 2.5 people per home. It's not a dramatic rate. Question is now, what kind of homes are we selling? And if you break down total, what you can see is low-rise sales have been declining and high-rise sales have been growing really after the growth plan of intensification was put in play. So you can see here that the danger, of course, is if you only look at condo. If you looked at condo in isolation of total housing, you could really get it wrong. And I think that's the risk, unfortunately, that we've seen in a lot of the media recently, where there's no concept around shift. High-rise growth is there because low-rise growth has been declining, and that's part of the policy.
Right. So in the industry in Toronto, we often speak about the 100,000 people that come to the area every year. So based on the numbers that we see in terms of population growth and demographic growth in the country, but specifically in the Toronto market, and some of the concern in the media with respect to, is there a slowdown? I guess the question is this model sustainable? Will we continue to build condos?
Well, I think people have to live somewhere. And with a low amount of availability of low-rise development, how do you house your population growth? Well, it's got to be through intensification, and the dominant form of that right now is high-rise development. But when you talk about the perception of this, you've got to be very careful because we need to have perspective. Fact without perspective is very dangerous. And you can see here when we look at the year-to-date sales activity for the GTA, high-rise homes up top, low-rise homes in the bottom, and total home sales, the sum of both of those in the bottom, at just over 18,000 units sold as of November. You could look at that market in 2 ways. It could be down 27% from last year, and then, in fact, that's exactly what you've seen. And that's what everyone focuses on. But if you look at this in a longer-term perspective, 2012 is probably the 4th strongest year for high-rise sales in the GTA's history. And low-rise sales are the 2nd lowest we've ever seen, and a large part of that has to deal with availability. Builders can't sell what they don't have. So the growth that we're seeing, albeit slowing down from last year's high-rise sales, is really quite good on a long-term basis.
So what I'm hearing today are some key messages. I'm hearing that Canada is one of the most urbanized countries in the world.
Correct.
I'm hearing that people continue to move to Canada, and that's one of the driving forces of our marketplace. I'm hearing that people are still considering real estate investment as a safe, secure investment. What else can you add to that today, George?
Well, I think the only thing that I would add is the price impact on shift. When you look at the shift in housing forms between one kind of housing and another, the relative affordability that is starting to take shape in Toronto is going to mirror what you've seen in Vancouver. And what's that? That is the form of housing that we're creating less of, the low-rise home, that's increased. We're not talking about that, but that's gone up by 16%. The price gap that was once $78,000 between a low-rise home and a high-rise home is now growing and is now $177,000, and it'll probably grow to $180,000 by the end of the year. So the affordability now is a function of what form of housing will you have. And because of the shift in housing, low-rise homes will become increasingly more expensive based on short supply. And that means from an affordability standpoint, high-rise or high-density homes are likely the road forward for affordable housing inside of the GTA.
That's great, George. Thank you very much for providing your insights today, and I hope that we were able to provide you with a brief description of what's happening not only in the Canadian market, but specifically in the Toronto market as it relates to new homes. Thank you again for attending today's seminar.